Welcome back, AP. Welcome back to our super short flip that we're about to record, right? I promised you that I would keep it under 10, so let's keep it under 10, right? So the big thing about it is we left off in class today talking about the humiliated, the distraught, the languished, the dumb, the short, the busted teeth, the weird-looking Charles I, who's going to knock on the door of Parliament and get laughed out of there, and he's going to end up being so butthurt that he goes off and he forms an army, and he creates this little thing called the English Civil War, right? Because we're going to have the Parliament fighting against the monarchy. That's right, I'm going to say it again. In the 1640s in England, from 1642 to about give or take, like 48, you're going to see the Parliament, the House of Commons, raise an army and fight against their king, which is the very first time this has ever occurred in English history. To a degree, right? The first time the Parliament's ever done it, but the nobles have raised an army before. You know what I'm talking about, Magna Carta. Exactly, right? So getting into it, though, we got two different armies that are going off to fight in this English Civil War. Our first one is known as the New Model Army, a.k.a. the Parliament Army, a.k.a. the Roundheads, right, is what they were actually known as going into this entire fight. Now, why were they known as the Roundheads? Why were they known as the New Model Army? They were known as the New Model Army because they're going to use some of the newer modifications and things that Gustavus Adolphus actually introduced during the 30 Years' War, right? This is also ultimately ironic because of the fact that, of course, England was never involved in the 30 Years' War, right? But they're going to mimic these different ideas that, like, Gustavus Adolphus is going to use, and they're going to create this new model army. It's going to have more musketeers, it's going to use more shock troops and stuff like that, more movable units, and more of these elements that the father of the modern-day military himself actually created, right? Now, why are they called the Roundheads, though, right? Now, there are a lot of theories to this. Now, a lot of people say, and a lot of historians say, they're known as the Roundheads because some of the boys that actually marched out front of their army were members of, like descendants of the House of Commons. So they weren't as wealthy as the old model army or the gentry or the people that supported Charles. And because of this, they had to shave their head to avoid lice, right? Now, another big one is they were parliamentarians, so they just had shorter hair, right? And another one is some historians say it might actually be because of, oh, hello, look at me. I am actually this guy. All right, so now, that was unintentional. But actually, some historians say that as well, it might be because of the rounded helmets that they actually wore into battle, right? But regardless, they were known as the Roundheads, right? Now, did they call themselves Roundheads? No. The other guys called them Roundheads as a jeer, as an insult, as like a poking at them little thing, right? Just like the Roundheads refer to the old model army, aka the gentry or the wealthy, mercenaries, and cavalry, as these people known as the Cavaliers, right? Now, that is where, and that is very, very important to understand, that the name Cavaliers is going to have ramifications throughout most of Western history, because if any of y'all actually know the history or the actual career of LeBron James,
LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James.
Exactly, right? If you know anything about LeBron James, you know that he actually started his career with the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? So Cleveland Cavaliers are actually named that after the members of the English Civil War known as Cavaliers, right? Fancy swordsmen that were distinguishable by three different things: their long, luxurious hair, their fancy mustache, or the fact that they had so much money that they could afford to put an exotic animal feather in their hat, an ostrich feather and stuff like that. But the Cavaliers were called Cavaliers not by themselves. They were called Cavaliers by the Roundheads because they referred to them as caballeros, or basically these fancy horseback riding cavalrymen that actually originally came out of Spain. So basically they're saying you're foreigners, you're gross, we don't like you, right? So this war is going to rage, though, and it's going to be particularly violent, and of course that's not what an actual cavalier looks right here. The Cavaliers actually looked a little bit something like, wait, no, go back now, come on now, like that, right? So the big thing about it is that is how you distinguish that cavalier, right? The Cavaliers versus the Roundheads is going to be a major pitched battle that's going to see several very different big events, including the Battle of Naseby and the Battle of Edge Hill, right? Now the thing about it is, though, is we are now going to start our in-depth discussion of the English Civil War. Just kidding. No, we're not. All right, so we're actually going to reduce this down to one bullet point. It was back and forth. Early on, the Cavaliers were winning some big battles, and then the Roundheads would retaliate. But the biggest thing you need to understand is that during the English Civil War is their leader, the leader of the Roundheads. The Roundheads' leader, the guy who led the Roundheads to victory, is a man by the name of Oliver Cromwell, right? He comes to power, not to be confused with the Cromwells from Halloween Town. Also, by the way, happy Halloween. Big fan. Now, the thing about it, though, in general, is Oliver Cromwell, a devout Puritan, member of the House of Commons, aggressive anti-monarchical person, is going to show up and begin to lead the Roundheads army. They're going to be more severe, more vicious, and more intense than the Cavaliers, and they're going to end up winning this war, right? Oliver Cromwell will lead the Roundheads to victory using this new model army, using these new types of military tactics, using mobile cannon fire, using mobile artillery, and at the Battle of Edge Hill, they will actually win a major victory and send the Cavalier forces packing, right? Now, with that, though, he's going to come into power, and when he shows up, he basically becomes the new de facto leader of the entirety of the English government, right? He shows up, fires members of parliament that do not support him, and creates this thing known as his rump parliament. Now, why is this terrifying? Because the king has just lost this war, right? So the king has just lost this war. That's a terrifying aspect because the King of England has just lost a war to his own people and to the House of Commons, right? And also, you've got a guy that's come to power that's now leading the House of Commons who is the exact type of person that James I hated, a devout Puritan, right? And what do we know about Puritans? That they hate everything fun and that they're very determined to purge Catholic elements of the Anglican Church and to also create a social revitalized state of England that's going to ban different things and not allow different items. And also, this guy has come in and he's created his own parliament with only people that like him. This is terrifying. It would be like if I went into a faculty meeting, right? And I said, we're going to pass some new rules and regulations about Chappelle, right? And if I just started firing faculty members that didn't agree with anything that I liked, so that way I can unilaterally pass whatever I want. So we have right now what smells a little bit like a tyrant in sheep's clothing, a wolf in sheep's clothing coming to power in England, right? The biggest thing that he does early on is he holds a trial for Charles I. And Charles I actually is executed, right? Charles I is going to have a trial held for him, and for his crimes against England, he is going to be brought out front of the entirety of England on the lawn of Whitehall Palace, and he will have his head removed from his shoulders, right? The big thing that ended up happening in this entire event is that apparently he wore 2 shirts that day because he didn't want to shiver and look weak. And also, in the long run as well, he had an orange stuffed with cloves inside of it so he wouldn't pass out, so the smell would actually keep him awake. And he refused the bag, he put his own head on the block, and BAM! He ends up being executed, right? Now, in this process, where are all of his kids? Where is everybody else, right? Now, during the war itself, Charles I was fighting in England alone, right? And while he was doing this, his wife, Henrietta, and his 2 sons, Charles and James, are on the run in France, right? So when Charles died, his family was safe and sound over in France, just to give you a heads up. Because this is going to come up a little bit later, and it's going to become very important. Because the son, Charles Jr., is going to challenge Oliver Cromwell for the throne to try and get it back and give it back to the monarchs, right? But it's going to take him a little while, about 11 years, right? Cromwell is going to come to power, and he is going to lead England during this time period known as the Commonwealth, right? Cromwell shows up, and during the Commonwealth period, it will be 11 years. Again, almost exactly like the 11 years of tyranny. 11 years where there are no kings, right? No more kings whatsoever. Where England is ruled as a republic-type state, where the power resides within the House of Commons. There will be no more bars. There will be no more drinking. There will be no more theater. There will be no more excessive jewelry. Toys were outlawed for children to be played with in the streets. Catholics were banished over to Ireland. Cromwell is now in power as an authoritarian dictator. And he also, though, did one good thing, and he allowed the Jewish to actually return to England, which is very, very important. Now, what are we getting at with this entire thing? We're entering into a very strange period of time in English history, right? Where Oliver Cromwell has come to power, and you have lost the monarchy, right? The monarchy has now been stripped away, and we're now looking at something completely different. We're now looking at a republican system. Now, with that, Cromwell is going to be able to do whatever he so chooses. He will destroy anything he wants, ban anything he wants, and destroy any communities he wants. He actually was very well known for going into Ireland and burning down entire villages and cities that acknowledge themselves with the Catholic Church, right? He also destroyed different things like bars. He closed theaters, outlawed excessive jewelry. Y'all, he's even going to try and ban Christmas, right? But the big thing about it is we're going to stop right here in the middle of the Commonwealth period. And that is going to be what's going to be on your test. We'll pick up on this part right after the test, and then we'll keep going in, and then we'll talk about the age of genius and all the stuff that's going on in the background during this time period. But y'all have a great one. You're going to crush this test. I have full confidence. I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.